And Victor, can you turn on the recording?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, we are streaming on YouTube, and I'll give back the host to Guillermo.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Victor.
Problem. Okay, have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. So we have Javier here, Lorena. Let me see if I see Lorena. I think she's not here yet. And Wendy, so we're gonna wait a little bit for Lorena to enter, so we can start. I will also copy the link for the reviewers, for Javier, Wendy, and Lorena, so they can, if they can take a look at all the drawings in, or they wanted to zoom in at some point. Of course, you can ask the students because they have like their presentations, but also if you want to take a look at something else, you can go directly to concept board. So I'm going to post also that link on the chat. Just so the only one missing is Lorena, but I think we should start so we don't get behind, because as you know, we are jumping from one room to another, the instructors, so we don't want to be behind, so we can see all of our students. First of all, thank you very much, Javier, Lorena, and Wendy for being here. We're really glad that you join us, and we're really looking forward to your feedback on each of the projects. So I'm going to be the timekeeper for Bennett, Mark, that's the first student, and then Bennett would be the timekeeper for the rest of the students during the morning. So we have each student will have 7 minutes, and 1 minute before we give the students a warning, just to let them know that they have 1 minute left, and then the reviewers will have 18 minutes to give their feedback. Of course, they can divide. You can divide as you wish, Javier, Wendy, and Lorena. So and the timekeeper would also give you a 1 minute warning, just to be sure you can conclude or wrap up. So that's kind of the deal. I don't know if you have any questions or doubts, or the students have any questions or doubts. Okay, so Bennett, maybe you wanna try share screen so we can see that everything's working.
Yeah.
So we can start at 9:30. If you want to check full screen mode.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Guillermo, I am here. Sorry for the delay. I was listening to you on the YouTube channel, so I didn't miss anything. I will continue.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Lorena. We're really glad having you here. So, Bennett, I think you can go for it.
Okay.
Thank
Hello,
you.
my name is Bennett Mark. The working title for my project is DIC, which stands for Do It Communally. Here's the main axon showing how the project is inserted into the context of the site here in New Orleans. In the horizontal home project, I was trying to create a very open and free-flowing space. Using structure as a vessel for this, the project has a very light construction system that invokes a certain type of rhythmic quality and lends itself to creating feelings of openness. In my other projects, I continued to use structure as a driving point for my designs. After defining the feeling that I wanted to achieve in each project, I thought about how the building's structural connections and materiality can help create that feeling. When drawing porches for the porch exercise, I came to realize how vital porches are to a New Orleans block. Porches in New Orleans are a great example of the community feeling that exists here, and I believe that they're an essential piece of the New Orleans home. The site is a typical New Orleans block covered with an eclectic combination of different homes. There are many idiosyncrasies between each home, creating a lovely and authentic atmosphere. It is important to maintain this level of authenticity and uniqueness on the site. There's a struggle between collective housing and the sense of individuality that a home provides. To balance these two ideas, this project employs the concept of incremental housing. This is the process by which homeowners themselves become involved in the construction of their homes. There are essentially two different types of units, but the units on the ground floor are slightly different because they have double height spaces with lofts that serve as bedrooms. The unit on this page starts off as a small sized home, but then can be expanded by the owner via lightwood frame construction to become a medium-sized home. Here we have the plans for the larger unit. It starts off as a large unit and can be expanded to be an extra large unit via the same simple construction methods. Each unit on the ground floor has access from the street onto its own porch to try to maintain the local New Orleans tradition of the site, and also has access from the interior of the project. Here we have the small unit plans for a typical floor, and here we have the large unit plans for a typical floor. The project has a central space running across its west-east axis. This creates a path that is open to the public. This space would serve as a park or plaza within the co-housing structure. On the ground floor, there is a stage for small performances, a large workshop for working on personal projects or for constructing pieces for expanding one's home, and a community house that has large tables, a kitchen, and lounging area for hosting events. The houses on the second level are connected by large decks that act as both circulation and communal space. In the center, the deck becomes even larger to accommodate outdoor cooking and dining space. And on the roof of the workshop, there's a garden where community members can grow their own produce. On the third level, the decks are minimal to allow natural light to enter the lower spaces. In section, the building creates relationships between the different levels of decking in central plaza. This allows for people on the different levels to see what's going on through the entire building, which encourages social interaction between the building inhabitants. The project is primarily constructed out of wood, as it lends itself well to creating intricate and rhythmic structures. Working in perspective, the project tries to achieve a relaxing and free-flowing feeling. Its goal is to be a space where someone can feel comfortable and at home. Thank you. That's everything.
Thank you very much, Bennett. So now we have the feedback from the reviewers. Let us know if you want to, Bennett, show any specific drawing, or you want him to go back at any point.
I'm trying to get the concept board up on my iPad. I'm getting there so that I can look at all the drawings together.
Perfect. Thank you, Wendy.
I guess I could say, hang on, now I need to navigate to you here. I mean, I'll start in a kind of somewhat banal but important way, which is that, Bennett, I think your graphics are really strong. I don't know if that will just be the case across the board, but I think not only are they really clear, but they're also compelling. They're clear both in terms of the intricacy of the plans, including the furniture and the entourage, but also in terms of your intent and the diagrammatic pieces. Since I always like to start, especially with an urban project like this, sort of from the small scale, big scope first. I wonder if, since I am having trouble getting on the concept board on my iPad, could you go back maybe to the to the private public diagram, the block diagram that you had? You had gradations of public to private and small to big or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, there. So what I'm looking for, and I was actually trying to compare your diagram to the plan and look for even finer grains of public to private, because I thought it was very astute that you acknowledge the importance of the street and the porch. I mean, the porch is only important because the street is so important to public life in New Orleans, right?
Mhm.
And it really is the piece of the house that it belongs to the street as much as it belongs to the house. You know, it is this really strong mediating ground. And so I'm kind of I'm reading into your public-private diagram another grain of specificity, of detail, you know, where actually I can look at the various blocks of the houses and find those porches as almost, you know, being maybe even part of the street, you know. I'm just looking for that part. And I'm also wondering, and maybe you can just fill this in verbally, I'm just wondering if you made I do understand the kind of sorting the larger and smaller units. And I also know that from a previous review, you're navigating a few existing buildings that are to remain, right? So you kind of have to kind of work around that.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if you were thinking at all about how to kind of line up that series of porches, those all important porches, from one clump of units to the next, and even maybe to some of the existing houses. Is that, I'm not seeing that, but I'm just wondering if you thought about that.
I wasn't really thinking about that. Mostly when it came to the organization of where the units were on the site, I was mostly trying to keep each porch having access to the street, and also trying to create that central axis through the center to create a kind of an open public space. So that was kind of the driving factor, the two driving factors in organizing it.
It's a kind of a difficult problem, because on one hand, in the surrounding blocks and in your normative, if there is such a thing, a normative residential block in New Orleans, kind of traditional block, there is a very, very clear, it's almost like a linear progression of most public to increasingly private. And then the interior of the block is typically just splintered up between lot lines from one project to the next. I mean, one house to the next. So there is no shared public space typically, or semi-public space, shared space in the back, in the interior of the block. But in your case, there is. And so, you know, how to figure out how to manage those two mirror kind of images of gradation from public to private is an interesting concept. What do you have facing that collective space? I see, are those kind of backyards, terraces, or secondary porches? How do you move from the houses into that shared?
They're kind of like small back porches. I think it shows well in the perspectives. See, they like have, you can see it like down here and here. It's like a slightly more private space when you're leaving your house. Like maybe you could put like a bench there, or keep your bike there, or some plants. So it's supposed to be like a small transition.
Mm-hmm. Could you go to this section actually? And then I mean, I want to give others a chance to talk. I'm still getting a little bit
Which
more.
section? This one or
That
the?
one's fine. Whichever you think is the most comprehensive.
I think maybe this one.
Okay.
We have time, Wendy, so it's okay.
All right. So I guess I would just say that, I mean, so I started it as a question, but I guess there's an implicit comment there too, which is that I think one thing that really strikes me about New Orleans neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods in particular, is that there's such a disciplined and rigorous measure of unit and a kind of a application of that unit, whether it's a single house or a double house. There is this, I have several pictures that I've taken that I really love that I've put on Instagram and so forth of, you know, just looking down the kind of a series of porches that are meticulously aligned, you know, down an entire block and even on into the next block, where it's really almost like a shared room, a little bit like what you created in the interior, where you have a long kind of access corridor that's shared, but then you have kind of subtle demarcations of, well, yes, it's shared, but there is a kind of, this is my house's contribution to that shared corridor, right? And I think that really exists in many New Orleans neighborhoods where the houses are just very meticulous. Of course, that's created, I'm sure, to some extent by, you know, mandate, by codes, setback codes that were consistent for all of the houses. But there's just such a consistency, and there's such a deliberate kind of alignment of those spaces. And so I guess I wish, you know, that a little bit, I think you've created an amazingly rich series of spaces, both public and private and outdoor and indoor. But I wish there was just some one thing. And to me, especially since you emphasized it, and I totally agree with you, I wish that porch element was something, you know, that whether the porches are deeper or narrower, but that they all align and kind of overlap at some point to create this perimeter peripheral zone. And this is probably a comment I'll come back to. It's not just in your case, because I'm drawing my comment from my understanding of the traditional New Orleans block. And I do understand you're not just replicating that system, you're creating something very new and intentionally, and you're successful with that. But I think there could be something that really does tie the relationship of your kind of multifaceted block of different types of housing to the street. And to me, logically, that would be that kind of indoor-outdoor series of porches. So it might even been that some of your collective spaces that are on the ground level, maybe they have some sort of porch as well. Maybe they do. But I think if they had been completely aligned at some point, and they wouldn't have to, like I said, they wouldn't have to be all the same depth. But if there's some point where you could stand on any one of those corners and look down the two sides of the block and be able to sort of telescopically see through a continuous, I think that would make it would allow your project to be both eccentric, idiosyncratic, different, you know, pushing and challenging the New Orleans standard layout, but also hearkening back to something that you've already acknowledged that you see as something very important to the social life of this city in architectural terms. So I'll leave my comments at that. And I'm sure we'll come back to it in other projects as well, but it's a beautifully drawn project and a lot of exciting things going on.
Thank you.
Javier or Lorena, do you want to jump in?
I go. No, I just I agree with for sure. The graphics are great, Bennett. Congrats for that. It's a great effort, and I'm sure that you have seen yourself growing for the first day until the last one, how your drawings has improved. But going on with Wendy's idea, I think your project has a front and a back, right? The front is all the housing problem that you have solved, creating those type of units, the small and the large, and how they can grow. But for me, the back of your project, which is this kind of court or whatever you want to call it, I think it has something that could be more developed. That intentional community idea, what is the intentional community idea of your community? Maybe you have a chance to understand better how those corridors work. Right now, it's like, okay, I have to go from one home to another home, fine. Instead of a normal corridor, I create another corridor. But what are they used for? What apart from parking the bike? I mean, the community spirit has to be something that maybe can be developed in those spaces. And going on with this idea, I'm sure that all the effort that you put drawing your architecture is not the same effort you put drawing the nature inside this skirt. Let me see. When you, I still remember the trees in New Orleans. They are huge, amazing, unbelievable. It's like, so it's not a palm tree. It's much more than that. And maybe understanding that kind of biodiversity, you could find something to add to your community. I don't know if that's the answer, but maybe that could be a way to develop more these areas. Apart from, I'm saying this just to further steps in your project. Right now, it's like, okay, it's really, really, really well done. And I would also say that I do appreciate all the effort you put drawing the house, the home unit. I think it's a really well drawn and thought unit with all the measures. And I think it's a great work. So congrats, Bennett, congrats.
There you go.
I will jump in, following on Wendy's and Javier's comments. I would like to start by congratulate you, Bennett. I really like the way you have approached the idea of context in New Orleans for your project. And if you can go back to the AXO. Here, there is something very interesting about the idea of, as I understand, densifying a block in New Orleans, a very interesting block that is all kind of a square and always kind of made of very long units, as we see like in the blocks to your north, south, east, and west. I don't know what is happening to the west, or like where north is here, but in every direction there is like this very particular block and very long houses that I understand work very well in order to work with the climate of New Orleans that is extremely humid, very wet, and architecture is normally like very thin, as you don't want a lot of moisture, and everything what you want is ventilate. I understand that there is a diagonal in this like massing effort in order to somehow opening winds into that block. I would like you to explain a little bit more about how you have thought about winds and drying out and moisture, because I really see in the section that you are like above ground, and by doing that really responding to this idea of detachment from the soil that is wet. I also see like a lot of permeability that talks about that. But if you could please, tell us a little bit more how you have confronted the idea of thermal climatic as a response to housing in the city of New Orleans. That is one question. The other question is that responding to Wendy's and Javier's point on the idea of the pores, I see that there is a difference between in your blog approach, where in this axonometric, if I am taking like southwest as it is, and is totally different from the southeast, and it seems to be different from the north northeast as well. So I would like for you to talk a little bit more about like your decisions on how to confront the street and why in the northeast you are keeping your facade like all at the same datum, whereas in the other two you create like a recess in the second floor with respect to the street. And just my third question, it goes to the idea of the pieces that remain. I don't really understand in section because you didn't cut through those, how you were somehow thinking in continuity between those pieces and your project. So you can respond to those, that would be very helpful.
In terms of the climate, I was trying to keep the structure very light and open as much as possible. Each of the units is like kind of a shotgun home where you can open both doors. I live in a shotgun house here in New Orleans, and I really like opening up the house and letting the breeze move through. So I was trying to design the whole structure in a way where like breezes could move through and it would be like a nice open place to be. And then the other question about the recess, I was recessing the facade. I was trying to do it on all the sides, so in an attempt to make the building seem less daunting on the street, so it wouldn't be too tall, but it was getting too close to the house in on that one side where it's not recessed. So I had to push them together just to make it work. And then there was
Bennett, why didn't you do it in the northeast in this axonometric in the same manner you did it in the other two?
The northeast.
In this axonometric is like to the northeast. Like
that would be like here.
Yes. Oh no, that is the northwest.
Here, right?
Yes, that one. Yes.
Yeah, to make otherwise it was like overhanging on this existing plot. So I didn't want to, if I were to recess these top floors, it would be like on top of this basically, because it was getting tight. So that's why I was trying to add these like other spaces onto the back of this to kind of give these units something that, try to make it even, give something that they were lacking. And then what was the second question
like
again?
Your decision to leave the houses that you left, like which were the decisions, or like which were the why did you leave them there? Why are they special? And how are you working in section in order to create a good transition between the remaining and the proposed?
Right. These houses that are here, we didn't get to choose which ones to leave on the site. They were predefined. So I was trying to, I think like the original concept was that these people would be the owners of like this block, and they would be like commissioning this communal housing or collective housing structure to be built. So I was trying to make it so like their structures wouldn't be too overcome by the entire structure. So I was mostly trying to keep a good spacing between them. And then on this side is over here, it's more of a commercial area. There's like a steak restaurant and French Trick Coffee. So I put the workshop over here and kept that kind of low, so like more public activity would be going on over here, just so it all, and then over here, this house is surrounded only by housing. So it kind of keeps it more of like
and did you take the wind in consideration when thinking about the massing of your project? What is the major wind direction that you have in New Orleans?
I'm not actually sure what the prevailing winds are here, but I was mostly trying to keep everything as open as possible on all sides. To just that's kind of how I like to design my buildings, just to, I imagine like lots of breezes and like a very open, free-flowing environment.
It would be very nice if you. What is the north in this axonometric?
The north would be running. It's actually this
that
way.
Street.
Yeah, it's running. This is I think Dryad Street, and it's running towards that street.
So like let me annotate. So this is, let's see. So would you say like north is like this?
No, I think it's 90 degrees to that.
To
I
that.
should double check it though, to be honest.
Yeah, it's here. This would be
Oh, okay.
north, and to the south would be the Mississippi River.
River. Because I see the well in every block, no, the decision is just to confront the street. If we were to see the north, where is let's see, so north south, then it will be here. It seems that, and Wendy can talk more to that because she has studied this, I haven't, but like somehow there are like these long blocks that they are always like confronting this street. As I understand, the very amazing part happens in this section, which are the porches, that somehow they are understanding the street, no, in section, so how like you expand the street with the porches. So I think that this is happening in this part of your project, also here. Somehow it would be nice for this to address like this building here, no? And also like just extend the idea of that porch in that direction. And I totally understand why, probably because of like density or like the FAR that you were given, maybe like you couldn't do this here, but that doesn't really, you know, really work well with the massing that you are proposing. Like I would say, okay, if the decision is to recess and to have like this part of the porch, which is very beautiful, like I think that you are resolving the project extremely well here. I think that this is a fantastic section where somehow you are adding density but recessing from the street so that, as you said, you don't add like that height, but neither those shades, maybe depending on the sun and the day.
I'm really sorry. We have
sorry.
one more minute.
Okay, so
Thank you.
I will leave it there, and then we can come back in other projects to more comments, and then Wendy and Javier can add more.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, and thank you very much, of course, Bennett, for your presentation. Now we're going to, I'm going to leave Bennett as the timekeeper, and I'm gonna leave to another room. I just made you host, Bennett.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Okay. So I'm gonna leave, and you're gonna. Yeah, there's another structure coming. Javier, Lorena, and Wendy. Thank you very much. I'll see you later.
I need to ask how long is per student? I'm sorry I was late at the
7
beginning.
minutes.
30 minutes.
How long?
Total.
30 minutes total.
Okay.
So the student should speak for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then you'll have about 25 to reply. Good. Hi, Lorena.
Hello.
Hi, Wendy. I'm joining.
Hi, Carrie.
Oh, Javier. So good to see you. So, Frank, are you all set?
Yes, I'm ready.
Great.
Share my
Take it away.
screen. All right. Hello, my name is Frank Taylor. Carrie Norman is my professor, and I am a second-year undergraduate. The title of this intentional community is The Woven Park, and here is an initial glimpse of it. I'll be showing this drawing again later, but first, I'm going to explain my takeaways from previous projects that helped lead me to here. So before investigating schemes for aggregation, I looked at how domestic space wraps around and fronts open space, as well as how public and private areas can be separated. In my horizontal home design, the U-shaped interior surrounds the courtyard on 3 sides. Public activities take place on the left side, and private activities are reserved for the right side. In the vertical home, I explored how the public and private could be separated vertically and arranged spaces so that the higher you get off the ground, the more unfrequented spaces become and the more undisturbed you become. The sectional home gave me a chance to explore both verticality and the frontage of open space, with multiple floors featuring courtyards. So moving from single home projects to a project involving 60 homes, the early idea for this aggregation scheme was to organize it around a series of courtyards and have its walkways in the built environment set up a grid and separate outdoor public programming. Furthermore, it brings 2 great civic institutions into the urban block, the park and the library. So the things you might find in a public park, it weaves into the grid system on the ground level, and as you travel up the course the second level into more private residential space, small libraries are woven in. The idea is that the ground level focuses on exercise and physical wellness, while the second level offers a quiet repose from the action and more stimulates the mind. This diagram displays the organization of ground textures and materials, which consists of a boardwalk, pavement, gravel, brick, grass, and sand, and a more developed version shows how the park is broken up and assorted around the block. The outdoor program, consisting of basketball courts, a mini soccer field, volleyball, a skate park, mini golf, an amphitheater, food trucks, and others, is split up around 11 interior spaces that contain stair and elevator cores, lobby and mail space, laundry, ping pong, and pool tables. There is a separation of private and public access as well. Residents of the block ideally can access the block from the east and west side using these boardwalks, which lead to building entrances. The public can access the block on the north end, which also allows space for food trucks, and the south end. Here is a view of what that south end looks like, emphasizing the symmetry and the porosity of the project and the contrasting facades of the apartments and library. Preserving the ground for physical activity, the residential realm begins 16 feet above, where these long blocks of units are connected by tall glazed common libraries. Smaller private courtyards are also incorporated on this level to provide more light into units that need them. Here's a section through the tall hallway space where the stair cores, floating glazed library spaces, and covered exterior spaces can be seen. This section, cut perpendicularly to the previous one, reveals the skate park, food truck, soccer field, and the smaller outdoor porches above the ground floor. As you go one more floor above the typical floor plan, half the units from below are duplicated in an alternating pattern. Each of these units gets direct access to a rooftop terrace. This perspective highlights one of the 4 moments within the project in which the exterior space on the ground level is both open to the sky and surrounded on 4 sides by the levels above. There are 3 different unit typologies throughout the system. Units A and B occupy the same square footage. However, A is more common and contains 1 main exterior wall and a small courtyard space, while B is a corner unit and contains 2 exterior walls. Unit C is double the size and essentially a smaller unit mirrored onto itself. This final perspective is located at the corner of the block, which allows you to peek into its interior and see how the complex relates to the street on two different sides. The grid formed by the intersections of the heavy apartments and the thin floating hallways and the intertwined park and library ultimately create a community that is tight-knit, where people cross paths often, where you can dwell in intimacy but are never too far from the excitement, where a bounty of physical and mental needs are just a few feet from home. Thank you.
Frank, can you point out, I'm a little confused. Are the galleries, those glazed are the walkways and the libraries in those stripes, in those zones, or where are the libraries? They are.
Yes.
So you're kind of walking down a hallway, but then you enter sporadically pieces of library, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, I really, really admire your initial, your whole presentation was very thoughtful and clear. Not just, I mean, graphically, yes, but also verbally and your intent. And I admire your ability to kind of wrangle, wrestle, choreograph this rather complex series of spaces to invent a whole series of landscape spaces, which I think is key. I mean, in our climate, people do tend to be outside as much as inside, if not more. And the fact that you haven't, I'm assuming you've invented these because I haven't heard about basketball courts and shuffleboards and all those other things. I think you should have shuffleboards, by the way. I'm a big fan. I went to high school in Florida, but some of those long strips, they look like that, maybe a dog park or something. At any rate, I think you have a really promising array and attention to the outdoor spaces and the programming of them and how they are woven into, really they're woven into the housing, but they also become extensions of the street and the street life that I was talking about in the first project that I think is key. If the project like this in New Orleans, I think if you don't nail that component, it's kind of hard to go on to the housing and whether it's good or not. That to me seems like the big job. And I think you've done a really fundamentally, kind of extraordinary job with that. Very, very thorough, very thoughtful, very, very innovative and creative. I also like the idea of these, these kind of programmed walkways. So they're not just walkways and you're not just depending on whether they're good spaces or not, because someone, some residents, put out good furniture and spend time there. I mean, you're actually giving people a reason to go there, not just to walk through, but to actually stay. I think that's neat. I think there might have been, assuming that they don't exist along the entire bar, right? They kind of happen sporadically, as I understand it, along the bar.
Yes.
So it might have been, is that correct?
Yes, in between.
In between the housing, right?
Yeah, in between.
So it might have been neat to just maybe have a kind of sectional change there. I know you have a sectional change maybe overall, but maybe they stay low when they're just hallways and then they pop up when they become the library spaces, or the opposite. Maybe it's nicer to kind of sit in a more kind of cozy and smaller section space for the reading. And I don't know, but some differentiation of where those occur would bring your plan diagram into a sectional component and clarity. It might have been neat. My only quibble, and I mean, because I love your project, I hope that's clear. I love your project on every level. I think it's extremely rigorous and disciplined, but also rich and multifaceted. That's not easy to do, especially when you've also got to kind of juggle these 3 existing buildings, which I think, again, you've given them their autonomy. You've been hands off. You're not compromising them, but they're also woven into your diagram. They're woven into your composition. And I think that's extremely convincing. Where I would quibble is I almost wish, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm gonna wish you hadn't done the renderings because what I want to talk about is sort of the imagery of the place. And I gather you chose brick and kind of glass and steel as your palette of materials. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Yeah.
So there's just something about it. It looks so different. Like I love your project in Axon here as a line drawing, but when you showed us, yeah, that, and the front one was even more so. It's kind of, to me, screaming kind of institutional, it's kind of screaming almost like correctional facility. There's a real not porous, not residential feel to it. And I'm certainly not one to say that especially if it's multiple housing units, that it needs to be, house, 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 house. Not at all. But I think, can you go back to the first one, the one where you showed, the first rendering you showed? By the way, I love the courtyard one. It just feels like it's a school. It's so monumental and doesn't really feel, it doesn't grab onto the kind of imagery, the porosity, the approachability, if you will, of housing in New Orleans. And so I'm just wondering what could be done about that, because I love the diagram, like I say, and I love your scheme in Axon. And I don't think it's just the material choice, but I think that might be part of it. And I'm just thinking this through. I don't have answers for you, but I feel like maybe some degree of breaking up those brick kind of portions of the facade more. I like the way, I really love the way some of those windows, they're there, but they're blank. We're seeing actually sky on the other side of them. Maybe some degree of differentiation of the cornice line, some kind of, and again, I'm saying things that I don't think I would normally suggest, but there's something that needs to bring this to a more, to an imagery that feels more approachable. I don't, for lack of better words. And I also think that it would be interesting to explore the difference between these external facades, which I think you could easily argue they should be more formal, and the interior facades, could be much more informal and maybe have multiple projections in different heights. So, and maybe a different material, maybe on the inside there, it's a wood, you're using wood siding or something like that. I mean, I love your project, so I don't want to leave on a bad note, but I would say the one thing that I would, if I were you, I would be determined to, having done these perspectives, I always think it's good to do them early on and then go, I got to address this, because it's the one false note to me. And it's certainly not, it's correctable. It's easily correctable. But I think if you sort of saw the facade as much as a part of the street as you do the spaces on the ground level, and saw that it too is it's the wall of this, it's contributing to the wall of the street that continues on either side of it, I think you might be able to make it feel a little less imposing and formal. Do you follow what I'm trying to get at here?
Yes, I'll follow.
But it's such a well-considered project and so well executed, and on every level. And the programming, I think, is superb. You really hit the nail on the head with the
Thank you so much.
Programming.
Frank, congrats for your project. I do like, the strongest idea you have for me is the stripes. So I would like just to say one thing, is why didn't you keep following that stripe idea inside your homes? Could you go to any home unit?
Yes. I just, as the stripes, do you mean the stripes on the glazed, the library spaces, or what exactly do you mean by the stripes?
Yeah, you have those stripes, right? Which are the library, and those stripes, which are the homes. And then you split this stripe into two parts, because you have one and one, this side, this side. So once you move inside one of those, for instance, this one, and you have like this stripe but for me, once you move into this interior, it's a little bit more confused. Why don't you keep following this kind of stripe idea? I don't know how.
Yeah.
Maybe just understanding that this is clearly shown. I don't know how, but
Yeah,
you know, trying to.
I think that's I think he means just at a smaller scale as an organizational device, right?
Yeah,
And that's a great
that's
comment.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Keep
think
following your idea. Maybe.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think I definitely put more thought and time into the organization of it on the larger scale, and I could have put some more. I could have incorporated more of that
for
into
sure.
the units.
But it's just like if you had if you were able to have one more week to develop this project, I will jump inside your home units and try to explore what does it mean building a home with the stripes.
Yes.
It's just that idea, because all your urban and approach to this problem is clear. It's really, really, really clear, and it's well developed. And I'm pretty sure that you had a great time. I'm sure you had a great time. Yeah, developing that ground floor is really, really, really well explored. And I'm sure you did a research of what does it mean to put different materials into the ground floor. But it's just like, what does it mean building? How do I live inside a stripe? A private stripe, a day stripe, a night stripe, a cooking stripe. I don't know. Just have that in mind in order to keep growing with that. But congrats, Frank. Congrats.
Thank you so much.
Frank, I join Wendy and Javier in the comments to say that it is a really fantastic and really thorough project. And I totally agree with this idea of like really like meticulously working with the right scale in context, because somehow it just feels right, right? Like the height feels right, the composition of the block feels really right. The relationships with the remaining buildings is really well worked around. And I have to agree with Wendy that somehow when you go into the Axos, it just feels like, yes, I would say, like in this one, for instance, like continuing with the idea of, it seems that in the Axo, things are very fragmented while being connected through a mat building. So it is all a mat that can be, all connected in both directions, and then has different levels of individuality and collectivity, which is really well done. I would say these corridors that become the library, I almost want to ask you for that Axo that Javier, or that push that Javier told for the portfolio, just for them to touch the ground, because like somehow I feel that that is a great invention in your project. That could be like a contemporary porch in New Orleans of today. I also would like for that part to be like more like to work more like a thermal machine for your complex, and to maybe allow for an outdoor porch at every level that has different time frames along the day. And I really like the idea of like complexity but individuality. So like somehow, if I'm going to annotate, how much time do we have? Because I'm really bad with time.
We have about 10 more minutes, so feel free, please.
Okay. So in this one, I was going to think that, when I see like this entrance, this allows me to understand, okay, there is like a transversal, I can traverse this block, it is public. But somehow, to put it in context and make it like more fit to the character of New Orleans, maybe you don't need to like just open it with a cantilever, but maybe there is something to play in this open field that, you know, it could be more playful and three-dimensional more than the open void, in order to keep separating maybe different parts. I would like to ask about the material of the facade. How did you think about like this facade in terms of materiality?
I was thinking about it mostly as a material that would contrast with the libraries, which would be like a standing seam metal. So something like brick or concrete, something like heavier a little bit.
Yeah, I was thinking, I don't know, I'm sure you have looked at this project. I think it is in Borneo, Sporenburg. Do you know that project in Amsterdam? It is in the docks of the old port. Have you looked at it, Frank?
What is the project title again?
It's called Borneo Sporenburg. It is done by
I'm not sure if I'm familiar.
Okay, I will put it later into the chat, but it's done by West 8 and many different architects. What it seems to work for them is that the facade doesn't get like horizontality as you are getting in this view. It gets more fragmented by the use of different materials. So maybe there is an idea of materiality that needs to be hybridized, mixed, so that we don't read this idea of a complex that is all equal, but maybe it is done in time and it is fragmented and belongs to different people, and that can be read through the use of different materials in each of the parts. And that maybe, Wendy, that will erase a little bit this idea of wholeness, no, of the whole block. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. Those are fantastic comments. You said it so much better than I did, but we're on the same wavelength. I mean, I think some of it is just, you know, whereas you're so kind of urban, social, street life friendly, and then we have these little swaths that I can't stand in urban projects of the kind of no man's land of grass. And I sit here thinking to myself, how long is that going to be green grass? It's just going to be a bunch of Starbucks cups in about 5 minutes and beer cans. And, you know, why not let the building come to the street? And maybe not entirely. So like maybe this planarity, this kind of the severe planarity of that frontage, you know, could actually inhabit this zone from here to there, and some pieces project out and some pieces pull back in the kind of fragmentary way. I think in part that Lorena is talking about, but that, you know, you need a loggia. It doesn't even need a loggia. You know, loggia to me is like almost a sort of a European or an urban porch. It's an indoor-outdoor space, but it's really part of the building facade. So I mean, if some of these, because I don't think you have any units on the ground floor, right? You don't have any interior, right? So really, you could take a good bit of that whole lower level and make beautiful sort of perforated bales of brick, you know, that could make it feel less institutional, more inviting, more porous. It would be literally more porous, but also kind of from the standpoint of imagery, more inviting and more porous. So I think that this project is so poised to do that too, to be taken to that next level of development. And I realize everything just requires more time. And I'm not at all surprised that, you know, with all the work you did in plan, particularly at the urban scale, you did it so well that you didn't necessarily have time to really develop those ideas on the vertical surface. But I think that would be the next step for me, because I think you've done a much better, more lively project than these couple of renderings are actually giving you credit for right now.
In fact, just to add my support to these images, because I do like them. I mean, I have to say, no, why I do like them? because I'm trying to read this as not just a project for New Orleans. And for me, Frank, you discovered a system like a way to keep wowing other cities. And in this case, if we change New Orleans for another place, maybe this is a possible solution for this facade. But I do agree with Wendy and Lorena when I say that, oh, okay, this maybe is not the best one for New Orleans. Okay, don't worry. I can move this infrastructure, this system into another city and keep developing it and finding the best way to read this facade. So talking about this one more week, what to do in this one more week? Maybe different solutions for the same perspective could be a nice way to explain your project, because it's a modular system, and then we change the glass and we add whatever. And with that in your portfolio, you explain that you are not just working in New Orleans, that you are working on a system. And that's for me the strongest point of your project.
Thank you.
Frank, thank you so much. I am so pleased with the feedback that you've received on this project. It confirms what I've suspected all along. This is such a thoughtful concept, and it's really difficult to move a good concept into a good project. And so I just commend your commitment and dedication to following through. And I love this image. So I congratulate you on the body of work, the drawings, the development. And I look forward to seeing what you come up with next, Frank.
Thanks, Professor.
Yes, amen to that. We're going to keep our eye on you.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Lorena. Thank you, Javier. I'm going to flip out, and another instructor will be joining shortly.
Hi, Margarita.
Hello, how are you? Oh, Lorena. How are you? Wendy and Javier.
Hello.
Have you
hello.
made presentations? We're keeping time okay, so 27, good. Chris, how are you? Ready to go?
I'm ready.
Yeah, just
Ready as I'm ever
Yeah.
gonna be. All right. Go for it.
Ready. Yeah, let's go. So have time ahead.
Let's see. Okay, do y'all have the full screen?
Yes.
Okay, good morning. My name is Chris Collodi. I'm in Margarita's section, first year grad program. Uh-oh. It's a change? Yeah. So this project is called Pixel Place, and the idea is to bring the natural microclimate, the natural climate we have surrounding us in Louisiana into the urban grid. So here's the main ISO. And you can see there's essentially this logic where the public space that is from the street encroaches underneath the building and kind of enters into what would be considered the collective space. And there's this ability to blur the lines under this facade. And it's not, I don't so much have the natural drawn in here, but this whole pixelated interior courtyard, that middle would be a lake or a little pond surrounded by some marshland. So looking back at the previous projects, these are the horizontal and sectional homes and vertical homes. And you basically just see this logic of keeping on these strong orthogonal lines and no curves, no angles, and just trying to find opportunities to offset to create a little more facade in certain places, which gives you an opportunity for a window and for more ventilation. So just some lines to highlight that sort of logic, which is basically going to carry us through the rest of the presentation. As far as the site, we've seen some good context, but I wanted to highlight one thing that we haven't really talked about. This is just a screenshot of the surrounding 9 blocks that were modeled for us. And you can see it's very much just houses, right? But I did want to point out in the few surrounding blocks, if you just zoom out a little, there is precedent, if you will, for these larger buildings that take up an entire grid. You have this school, this house, churches. So it's not totally out of context to just place a massive blob here. A line drawing of the context so you can see, the just the nature of it kind of looking out of place relative to the rest of these houses. But I think that's a problem with most of these. I'm zoomed in, sorry. Another ground floor plan. Again, you can kind of see here that I've made an effort to leave the interior of this project just entirely open and have the buildings at once turn their back on the outside, but again, because they cascade up in a way that allow you to kind of come in underneath as well. So again, the idea is to bring in the microclimate. I was looking at Audubon Park here on the left, just the way this transitions from the water to the stone and up. There's also the Plaza del Desierto, which is really was the inspiration for the pixelation of the interior courtyard, where you could have a deck, you could have a stone paver, you could have concrete, you could have water, you could have marsh, whatever it would be. And then there's some gardening plots, which any of these could be used for a garden. Again, the main ISO, so you can just, you have to imagine, for lack of it being drawn, but some of that's concrete, some of that's marsh. Ground floor plan, we can kind of get into it. The interior rectangles, I was imagining those just long concrete benches. You'll see once again to this perspective, I'll try to hustle through. First floor plan, so on the ground floor, there's no residences. It's all retail and collective, like gyms and whatnot. But then you have these units, and I'll try and animate this as it goes through, which is focus on the middle part of each unit and watch how it kind of cascades up and away from itself. And then by the time you get to the top floor, there's an effort to basically remove a unit so that you can basically, just in context of these houses right here. Typical floor plan, you can see this is the vertical core accessing an extra small studio, a small 1-bedroom, and then a 2-bedroom. Just to compare the same logic on the top floor where you chop away that one unit. Excuse me. Another logic where you essentially take that same unit and double it in size, but there's nothing that really changes about the plan. In section, you can begin to see the 2 different logics of the one that cascades. Oh, sorry. The one that cascades and the one that doesn't. And then you can see the little pond. And in the perspective, you can again see that there's the unit is divided in 2, front to back. Some quick perspectives. I was imagining it being pretty concrete glass, kind of this future desert feel, but again, you could bring that marsh into the water. From the balcony, looking down. Again, 60 units right on the nose. Look for the size. This is an axon that kind of demonstrates just how dense that really is. And a couple quick diagrams showing you these public balconies on top, or excuse me, collective balconies, where you could access all the way from the core and arrive at the top and still have your own little balcony. Just distinguishing between the public and private zones. Yeah, that's all. Thank you much.
Hey, thanks. go to the concept board perhaps, or stay here at whatever Judith wants. Yeah, let's stay at the ground floor perhaps.
Yeah, the ground floor is a good one. Well, I would just say I really appreciate your approach to the block as a whole. Again, this is a very rigorous project where I understand your attention, your understanding that, you know, buildings go right up to the sidewalk in New Orleans. That's one of the things that contributes to the successful social life of the city, and how houses participate in that through these intermediary zones, whether they're porches or you do have a loggia that I was asking for in the last project, these series of loggias underneath the buildings, but you know, within, not at the corners, but within.
Cool. Can you spell that word?
Loggia.
Okay, thank you.
And as I tell some of my students, it's a fancy word for porch. It's the kind of it's a more European sense of a kind of a porch, but it's integrated in an urban context usually. You know, I think that the way that it's shown in plan, I love this idea of the kind of shared outdoor plaza at the interior of your block, you know, kind of doubling as a water retention zone. I just think that's kind of brilliant. I like the imagery of it better in kind of in plan than when you start to show it in the renderings, where it feels like the distinction between the retention area and the occupiable area is really stark. It feels like there's a big drop off, and then all of a sudden you're in this huge sandbox if it's not filled with water. And I feel like I've seen a number of urban plazas that incorporate really interesting fountains and water features. Usually in those cases, it's kind of pumped in, but with sprays coming up and children walking through. Yeah, and I just kind of wish that there was a sense of a more integrated gradation of stepping up and down to allow this intentional flooding to occur. I understand that you need to have lower elevations at some point so that the whole thing doesn't flood, but I think maybe slow ramping down of these different kind of stripes and portions of the composition would allow you to achieve that. But when it's dry, it still feels like a whole space and not just
an empty pool. Yeah,
a surround of urban plaza with a big sandbox in the middle, you know. But I think there's so many great precedents you can look at. I think that one that you showed, the desert, what was it? The
Plaza del Desierto.
That's a perfect kind of thing to look at. I think the High Line would be a neat thing to look at too, because again, it has that sort of striping that came originally from the rail lines, but then they interpreted as the ground rising up to include bench. So I think you know that's a tremendously potent space that you've created there. That would, I think you could strongly argue, is the heart and soul of your project. That it promotes both, you know, kind of ecological sustainability and a sensible interface with the New Orleans terrain, but also cultivates great social life and social opportunities and space. So I love all that. I don't have as strong a sense of the housing and how it works and the kind of the stepping back and why you think that's necessary. And I guess I also have a little bit of, I'm going to use my other colleagues, you know, Javier's comment from the last project, which is that I wonder if that really clear zoning, it's a perimeter zoning, it's a series of layers from the street to the interior in the block plan, could have been applied successfully to the unit plan. If that makes sense, you know, because I do feel like if you can go to an upper level plan that shows the units.
This is the first, second, and third.
So I see you have some of that, you know, so like at this level you have, I guess those are bedrooms and bathrooms that are that outer ring, and then you have the kind of public space you know, really kind of hugging the inside perimeter. I mean, that's kind of what I'm talking about, but I think, you know, how you program those two layers, or are there just two, or are there more, and could they be more strictly applied, would be the next place I would go to kind of use that idea of the layering, this kind of perimeter of layering of outside layer, next layer, then the interior layer, and thinking about what makes most sense to be adjacent to the street versus adjacent to the interior kind of plaza, courtyard garden. I'm not sure, you know, in this area, is if it's really noisy at night, maybe don't want to put the bedrooms on the outside. I really don't know. If you want people to be able to see, you know, second line parades going by, again, maybe, you know, public space should hug the, I'm not sure. I'm sure you could make a good argument either way.
Right.
But I just wonder what the logic, if you thought that through, and what the logic was as to how you zoned the units, you know, and from public to private. And
Yeah, there was really, that was, I think, the initial logic behind cascading those central units, is that you could have a front and a back porch either way. And then when it came to, you know, trying to just densify, that kind of went away on the edges for sake of just adding 2 units where it used to be 1. So the cross ventilation went away, and along with that issue you're bringing up, the whole logic of how does it relate to the public space. Where the other issue especially is, like, when you arrive out of the core right here, you have this zone that's just essentially nothingness to get you only to your unit. So there was, could be more of an effort to expand that area on every level, so you could kind of have a porch that was a collective porch but not a private one on each of those cores. But yeah, in the end, just iterating down to get the number of units, this, you know, when it came time to choose which unit do I chop off, the outer or the inside, chose to chop off the inside so that you could look this way. But I do see the argument for the other one. And there's really no consideration for for any sort of solar exposure, which would really define that answer. I think these are essentially just the same units translated around. There's a little bit of an effort on this corner to create more porch, but
Javier Moreno.
Could you, hi Christopher, could you go back to the ground floor, please? Oh man, I thank you for this gift. Thank you. Thank you for that. I mean, I go with Wendy's idea, right? So could you imagine that this, let me draw again. Could you imagine that this is your block, this one, and could you imagine that this house is here, this one is here, this one is there, that one maybe is, I don't know, here. Could you see all your project not in a vertical perfect cut in all the facades? It's here, man.
yeah,
It's here.
what?
And then let me. No. It's not so easy. It seems to be easy, but it's
no, it's not easy, but it would be
not
amazing.
so easy. It's not so easy because here,
Yeah,
then you could do something different in here, and then find out what's going on in here. What I'm trying to say is that all the movement that you create in this pixelation idea, for me, the key word in your project is the pixelation, that you use it just for the urban problems, but then when you go and jump into the home, and then you solve your horizontal home, and then you applied it into your project. There's one more week to work, and that one more week could be just one unit, and try to find out what does it mean to pull and push this facade, and where do you pull and push that facade? Because when we saw other projects, this street, that street, that street, and that street are not the same. There is one that is a big empty space in here. So maybe in that one, you don't need to do any pull and push thing. But on the other one, you could do something that could be helpful to recover that idea of New Orleans porches, lodges, or whatever is the name. And then going back to this thing, to this gift you gave us. So nothing.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really hitting some light bulbs. It's like you take all this time to come up with this idea and then go back to the beginning with that idea and incorporate the rest of the context. I see.
But having said so, I have to say that all the answers you gave to your units are a pretty serious game. You play with the rules and you find how do they work. But now it's time to keep moving on and discover how far could we get. And just one more thing that I don't see really clear in your project is what is your intentional community? Where is it?
Yeah, I think I'm skirting around it. The intention is to simply bring the nature into the urban grid. And we had talked about garden plots and all this, but that's, I don't know, it's just a placeholder.
Well, but when I ask this, it's because it could be an opportunity to keep developing your homes. Mm-hmm. All that upper level, all those terraces that are, okay, this is empty, so common space. It's not like that. So it's what does it mean to put an empty space into a building which is called community? Nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it will be difficult to follow Javier's enthusiasm.
Hey, that's fine. That's fine.
So, Christopher, no, congratulations on the project. I was just going to add like some observations that I think are really helpful in the way you're working with the urban block. Which is that like somehow the buildings that remain in the block in this, and I agree, to me, the most beautiful drawing in your presentation is the ground floor, because somehow it is allowing us to read like a lot of effort in somehow addressing what is there, no, and responding to a climate, to conditions that you are trying to tame by that interiority of the block, which I think is fantastic. I have a question in regard to the difference between, because the name is Plaza del Desierto, but in reality, I think it's in Baracaldo, in the north of Spain. So it's a very rainy place. And the idea is to somehow probably work with the water and the pluviosity of that site. I am really intrigued by not seeing a lot of trees in New Orleans, when I would say, you know, when you go to, I've been to Savannah, never to New Orleans. I am assuming New Orleans is even more humid. And Savannah is like this amazing, you know, explosion of trees that have like all these, you know, branches hanging, like super, like into your body. It's an embodiment of humidity. And I wonder, like, how do you mesh, no, like that idea of that beautiful ground that is working with the water, with vegetation that maybe is not that low. I don't know if that will be a possibility in your project, because somehow, in a way, the tree is a pump in itself, and it seems that there is a lot to pump, a lot of humidity to pump in New Orleans, and I really see this as a system that it starts to understand that the interior of the block can be extremely performative towards that climate and towards that humidity and towards that climate. I mean, towards that, the idea of being more ecological and climatically responsive. And I think that in that sense, the project is brilliant, because it is putting all the density into the perimeter, no? And allowing like that interior of the block do the job that is not happening in the paved streets around that block. So that is super good. my question is like, I really like that you have like these buildings that look like anchors into that block. So because in each of the side, like very intelligently, the brief leaves these remainings, and that somehow I also read in this, let me find the, somehow like I read that if this is an anchor and this is the other anchor and this is the other anchor, that somehow like these parts of your project are also anchors to your buildings itself, right? Like somehow they are anchoring into the ground and allowing this porosity to enter, but also the water. So that is the idea that somehow, you know, if you are filtering through the block, then you need to think how this water enters when there is a catastrophic event or like a lot of rain, then you need to design for that entrance, how that is. So that could be design in section, and that would be super interesting. I also understand, like you are thinking about this as an open plaza. And I don't know how the how do you say, the inhabitants, the community of this block will feel about that during the night. But I see that some dust lines, so maybe you are thinking that at night you can close this and open. Can you explain that, Christopher?
It would be less night to day and more. It's mostly closed off, say with some sort of vegetation facade or something that is visually porous, but you can't physically come across there. Perhaps right at that line, each of these pixels would be a little body of water or something that is just another deterrent to go through. But then if you, let's say on a weekend or farmer's market or something where there was an event, you could remove some of those facades or slide them and they could come through. But the idea is that most of the time the public could only come up to that threshold and be able to look through. So to actually access, you'd have to come through
these openings?
This opening here at this
through the building itself, like through the anchors, through the anchors.
Yes.
That you can see, yeah, you can think about that a little bit further and how you can make this maybe more available in hours during the day. That will be very helpful. Then when you arrive to the corner, as you see, like this building is quite generous in that corner, whereas like you are very, very selfish with the corner of your block. So you need to be a little bit generous in that corner because it is too tight, but I think that is not a problem. And then last but not least, I don't want your concrete to go into your portfolio at all. So that minerality that you add at the end, I don't think that really works. You know, we are moving into a much more biological world than mineral, I think. So I think that for the structure that touches the ground, it maybe makes sense to have like that as an anchor. But I think that the upper levels can be much more lighter than concrete. I think that was your idea, that like somehow like that atrium, that loggia that Wendy talked about is like more maybe strong, and also it needs to, you know, confront hurricanes and it is what gives a structure. But I just think that it seems like a vessel on top of that will be better than having like all that concrete in your images. So you need to work with them because the project is far too good to end into that image. And maybe my last comment, I agree with Wendy with the recess of the blocks, that somehow I feel that it is very beautiful how maybe all the performance is in the ground, but maybe that performance doesn't need to. Oh, sorry, my Siri is talking.
That's funny.
That performance doesn't need to happen, I think, in the facade, and that will allow you to maybe like give more space, you know, like to recede more in the block, and gain more space for your 60 units, but be more generous, with that perimeter.
Okay.
I'm leaving to the other one. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I can kind of see what you guys are trying to say. There's back and forth between coming up with your idea and then just stop and totally rethinking it. Like I hadn't, I was concrete and glass all the way, but now hearing you guys say that, it's, come up with an idea and then make it cheaper, I guess, or make it simpler or integrate it better into the context. And I don't know, maybe you could say a word to the nature of this whole game where you're just constantly reiterating things. I mean, when do you ever land and stop? Like.
But do you say that like cheaper because concrete is more expensive?
Yes, that was my thinking.
But it's energetically also far more expensive for the earth. Like somehow the all the movement it is trying to move again, like farther away from processes that take a lot of energy, and that somehow I don't know how concrete works it works terribly in Massachusetts because it's very cold, but probably I don't know how does it work in New Orleans. Maybe it also gets moldy. I don't know what is the performance of concrete in this climate. You can tell us, Christopher.
Well, I wish I knew. I don't see a lot of poured concrete buildings around. Most everything, I guess, is just light wood. I mean, that's the cheapest way to go. I mean, I guess it's when you come to some big structural members, like you say, these anchors, I guess it's got to be something besides, it's got to be a steel beam or a poured concrete column, at least that aspect of it. But you could mix the materials or perhaps find a way to make it look like a concrete facade on the outside of a wood frame.
Oh,
Yeah,
yikes.
I just feel that the concrete is not a good material for housing. But that is just my feeling for this kind of weather. That is why I was asking about the performativity of the material.
I mean, there's actually a lot of masonry, especially in the French Quarter. The wood, the single family houses are almost all wood frame construction, but I would say most of the French Quarter is brick bearing wall with stucco, and it does well here because you don't have the freeze frost issue that causes stucco to crack and masonry walls to fail. So personally, I'm a huge fan of concrete, poured in place concrete, and I think that it could be used here. I do feel that there is that same issue of kind of imagery, of approachability, of how you treat it. I mean, I think if you said that it was concrete block with stucco, that might even be a more, that's something that's used widely in kind of South America as a kind of normal housing type.
You guys have 1 minute, sorry.
So, I don't have a problem with that per se. The thing that I definitely agree with Lorena on for sure is the idea of use of vegetation, particularly trees. I mean, one live oak tree in the middle of your beautiful floodable plaza, just one would be big enough to not only handle a lot of rainfall and soak it up, but also would provide shade, would reduce, the load on air conditioning, would actually make it, I think, a much more habitable space for more of the year because of the shaded areas. So I think that's a great idea. And I was thinking, isn't there a place maybe for one? And they can stand the flooding. If you go after huge rains and you drive by Audubon Park, I mean, it's a lake out there, and those live oaks thrive. So I think that there's a place for a live oak in there.
Trees, yeah.
Or a tree, a mama tree.
Well, I'll just admit that I'm embarrassed that I printed this drawing layer turned on because this is full of trees. And
Ah,
in fact, the that shape of that pond is dictated by the existing trees.
oh, okay.
That's what I get for procrastinating, though.
Okay. Well, that changes everything.
Yeah,
Just
well,
put it in the drawings.
well, fair enough. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Really
Thank
nice
you.
Okay, hi. Gonna-
Hello. Hello, Sansoles.
Hi, how are you, Lorena?
Nice to see you.
And Javier, how are you? And Wendy, right?
Yes. Hi,
Wendy?
Phyllis. Good to
How are
see
you, Wendy?
I'm excellent.
Okay, hi, I'm Anna Catherine Becker, and this co-housing community is known as Music Park. Physically, it is divergent from its uptown context, but the spirit of gathering around music weaves this community perfectly into the city of New Orleans. The plans for the horizontal and sectional home were used to develop the aggregation plans. Here's the horizontal home, and its shaping and internal courtyards were adapted to create the single-story units of the aggregation. The plans and double height space of the sectional home were developed to make up the two-story units within Music Park. And then finally, the vertical home. So Music Park is located in the uptown neighborhood with a very established urban fabric of shotgun, Italianate, and Queen Anne style homes. Located on the block with the aggregation are French Truck Coffee, Charlie's Steakhouse, and one remaining single-family home. Given how different this type of community is from the neighborhood, it is important that the people living there and their communal interests align with the culture of New Orleans. Since music has brought New Orleans natives and visitors together for generations, Music Park serves as a place for those people to gather, play, learn, perform, and live. All of this can be done in the pink units called music boxes, or the outdoor amphitheater highlighted in green. You can also see the two-story units in light blue and the single-story units in dark blue. To begin the design, a grid was overlaid on the available land, and the units were organized around a main axis that would come to define the public circulation. The difference between public and private is marked by the green semi-public porch spaces that are each shared by 1 to 3 units. The music boxes in pink are strewn about the green space of Music Park. The gray paved walkways connect them with the vertical circulation. You may have noticed the unique shaping of the music box practice rooms, which were developed for optimal acoustic conditions for different types of instruments. However, all of the spaces are adaptable to many different uses. This unbuilt artist colony inspired the scattered placement of the practice rooms to create separate and soundproof places. And the horizontal circulation that dissolves as the structure gets taller was inspired in part by the Next 21's lush walkways. The living units also have wooden shutters similar to these, a modern take on the shutters on many New Orleans homes. These 5 illustrated floor plans and a roof plan show how the green spaces respond to the light wells created by the voids in the structure's floor plates. These voids allow light to the lower floors and cross ventilation in every unit. The ground level has 2 main public stairs, private vertical cores for each of the 4 main living spaces, an outdoor amphitheater, and the music boxes. The first floor above ground has the only completed raised greenway. This is a space for gathering and walking for both residents and the public. As the stories increase, the greenways are reduced in size and only accessible to the residents. Each path has a general circulation space and smaller spaces created by voids that serve as porches for each unit. The voids and outdoor circulation spaces create dynamic views from all points of Music Park. Those on upper levels can see down to the amphitheater and across to their neighbors, while those on the ground level still receive natural light. Here's the 4th floor with only the top level of the 2-story units. And finally, just the roof plan. The 2-story units are cut through to reveal the double height space within. The single-story units here are seen in elevation. Behind the 2-story living spaces is the outdoor amphitheater with raised seating areas to look toward the stage under the main void of the aggregation. Here, the light wells of the single-story units are cut through to reveal how the floor plate pulls away from the windows to give privacy to each unit. For the unit typologies, we have small, medium, and large units. The single-story units have shared porch spaces and interior light wells, which you can see here, and the general circulation. And here's the breakdown of each of the small to medium and large units within. These living spaces rest on top of the music boxes and have the light wells that go down to the main ground floor. And then here is the 1st floor of the 2-story units. They're only entered from the bottom floor of the unit. And then the 2nd floor, you can see the double height space down to the living and dining area. And then the separation of those units. So finally, the experience, oh, and here's a section of the double height. And the experience looking to the amphitheater. This is a view of single-story units with the void in front of the windows. An interior view looking out to the double height. And here's a view of the music box on the ground floor and some of the activities that could take place in front. And finally, I'm going to show a little animation. Let's see. Sorry. Where is it? Okay, can you see that? Okay. And this just shows how the units come together with the pathways. Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure I understand the music boxes. Like, where are they? Are they interior rooms? Are they, what are they? Are they?
Yeah, so they're interior rooms around the ground floor. And so they are all these separate places for people to come and practice music, to learn music, or to perform in some of the larger spaces. And so they are connected to the units. You can see in section, like here would be a music box in relation to the building unit, to the living units.
So, but they're not always underneath the housing units above, or are they?
They are always.
They are always. So the
Yes.
roof of those spaces is always the understory of the housing above. Interesting. Well, I mean, you've got it's a tremendously rich project, and so I commend you on that. There's a lot going on, so it takes a while to get your head around it a little bit. Can you go back to the site plan or site axon?
Yes.
I mean, I really love the incorporation of the of the amphitheater space. I take it those stairs are coming from the upper level corridors for the housing. Those are exterior stairs coming down to the ground, right?
Yes, these are exterior public, and then you have these private cores that go for just the units.
Yeah, gotcha. So, I mean, at first I thought before you started presenting verbally, I was thinking, oh, how cool. She's got all these sunken gardens and things that are, you know, a little bit, I was still stuck on the last project that maybe were also retention ponds when they weren't in use. I think, you know, the amphitheater probably would have some sectional change to it. So it might be able to deal with water when you need, you know, when it's raining and you don't have a performance in there. It could become that. And I think that would be a neat idea to kind of make more intentionally. I love the light wells. I think that's something that's kind of underutilized in most suburban contexts, but you can get a lot of density and still get ventilation and light through that that kind of strategy. You know, this is a project where I really wish if you could go to the plan now, the site plan, but I really kind of wish you had control of the whole block. I haven't felt that way about all the projects, but it seems like here with everything you have going on, you know, that initial diagram that you did, that makes the square a 4 square. And so you have 4 quadrants. It feels like the lower right quadrant in your plan is the only one that's really fully realized the way you would ideally want it to be. You know, in other words, you have the housing hugging the edge, and that allows you a kind of a public space, in your case, an amphitheater performance space on the interior of the block. And I really kind of think it would have been so neat and rich to have that pattern recur in all 4 quadrants. So you could have different outdoor spaces, maybe of different size. You know, maybe they're smaller when it's attached to the, you know, when it's bounded by some of the larger units. So it means the outdoor space relative to that quadrant has to shrink some. Some could be more long and thin, et cetera. But you're prevented from, you know, you have to bring your housing blocks to the interior because you don't have control of the whole perimeter of the block, the corners, to put housing in. So, you know, I regret that a little bit because I'm stuck on that diagram of the crosshairs that you did to analyze this. At the same time, I mean, I think, you know, you've done a really great job of, I think, with scale of the project. These are really believable residential buildings. You know, it doesn't feel like this big kind of formal institution. It feels very approachable. There is difference and kind of variety in the spaces and the units, but at the same time, there is a very clear logic that plays out, you know, through every level, from the site plan level to the unit level to the housing and the experience. I kind of feel that the shaping, this is my take, that the shaping of the music boxes, which seems to be something you only ever really see kind of in plan, if they're trapped in the understory of the housing, is maybe a leftover from your precedent. Maybe that's not necessary. Maybe they could have been a little bit bigger or more varied in size as true practice or teaching rooms, and then occasionally a bigger one for performance if they weren't so shaped. I think it's a cool idea in the precedent, but I'm not sure you need that added layer of complexity. It feels not in keeping with everything else that you have going on. So I love it as a programming idea. I'm just not sure whether the formal, the way you dealt with it formally isn't really belonging more in the precedent project as opposed to finding a home in this one. But I mean, I think it's a really well-considered project. I really appreciate the way that you've organized the block and how that organization goes down to various levels, how you thought about the programming of the outdoor spaces. And like I said, I think that one big outdoor space has even more potential as an occasional retention pond that maybe you didn't even take credit for, but I think it would actually work that way. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a very handsome, thorough, well-considered project.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Wendy in one point, with all of the what she said. But for me, one point is the strongest point in your project, which is the size, the scale. You understood this size in the city, and then you discover what density means, and then your project is done. You multiply that 5 times, and your project is done. And that's a really, really hard thing to do when you live in a city such as New Orleans, where you don't see very often this kind of project. So congrats for that. And not just for building a clear element, rectangular element, that you keep working with that and then pulling and pushing the facades and finding the proper scale, the proper size for the city. And that's for me the best, for sure, in your project. And I agree with the idea of those, the music park, the music boxes, the music community. You have a chance to keep working with that, which is understanding that what happens with these music boxes in the ground floor is for the city, but the people who are living in this community are the musicians, and maybe in different levels of your project, they have like more music boxes, but private music boxes for the community, for the users, not for the public, but for the users. And then maybe those boxes add a little bit more of complexity to the way the 5 blocks are linked in your project. Because right now they are like corridors in a straight way, but nothing more related to the idea of what music means in your project. So maybe there's a chance to keep working with that idea of music boxes, but not just on the ground floor, but pushed into different levels in your project. But I mean, congrats, because the jump from this shotgun typology into the linear block multi-housing typology with this clear idea of what a court means in it, it's for me a successful semester for you, Anna. So congrats.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I totally agree with that idea. I was thinking to myself exactly the same thing. I was thinking, okay, you can think about the block, no, that we have seen repeatedly with these very long homes that are very, very, long getting into this block. And I totally agree with the idea that somehow that block becomes a short slab, no, because or I don't know about the width of it. It would be interesting to know, like, what is the width that you are working, and how are you deciding on the width depending on where you are falling into the block? Because I see that there are different widths to that slab block, and sometimes, for instance, in this drawing that we have here in the middle, let me annotate. If you were to, like, for instance, this one looks very disaggregated. It just is like kind of boxes, not that like resi with each other. Whereas this one, the width is bigger, and this one, the width seems to be the same, and this one seems to be the same, and this one is the same as the other side. So it will be interesting for you to explain when you talk about your project, how these decisions were taken with respect to what you wanted to create inside. I totally agree that, like, somehow for me the interior that is gathered by the terraces, to me, is unnecessary in your project, because you're trying to, like, it is, I think, your first response to talk about community, and somehow the community seems to be music in this block. And if you were to say, okay, there is a festival in New Orleans every year, and this block is part of that festival, and there is a way that contributes economically to the block, that will be very good for the community to collect benefits from this festival that happens yearly. And And somehow during the year, what activates that space are people. I really like that there are musicians working inside a room that is sonically, insulated so that they don't cause any problem with each other, because that is very annoying. Like I used to have a pianist as a neighbor and I hated him too. You don't know how much. And he was wonderful, but like it is, when it is your neighbor, it's not that wonderful anymore. So it is great that the musicians have their own space to practice, but then what can happen is that goes into your plaza and in a managed way. Like somehow what happens when things become public is that you need to manage them for them to operate in a collective. And that is what normally happens in the streets of many cities, that they have time to time. I am living this year in Porto thanks to COVID. And it is very funny because in the main street, you see like the musician playing and you see like the next one waiting for his act to end. So when he ends, then he comes. So, that becomes an activator for that interior, and doesn't necessarily need to be connected physically by those platforms. But needs to be managed so that it feels like a community, that works together and operates in the neighborhood. I also think I am the one that comes to talk about the portfolio at the end, but I don't think that the renders help your project, because like somehow they feel very, I am going to say it again, like I just feel that somehow New Orleans don't speak to me as a concrete place, and I don't know why. So Wendy and Javier and Sonsoles and Anna, you need to convince me of the other, because I've never been. But like, I just feel that like it is too cold a material for this climate, and doesn't really help thermically in the climate neither. And so I really like your zones, like your wind tunnels in the interior that really help the air to flow. I really like the double heights in the last units, because those are the ones getting more isolation from the sun, and therefore they are higher and they can ventilate better. So I really like that. But then when I get to your materiality, is not speaking to me about New Orleans yet. And it is there where you, I think, need to work a little more, because in these axes and sections, you are brilliant. And the work is like really well done. And then I understand, this is the beginning of a long path, and we are just asking you to push it a little further. But it's just that it really loses the character, of what I imagine, like full of trees and people playing under the trees and really gathering and surrounded by a frame of housing that is porous, all of that. But congratulations, Anna, on the work that you have done.
Thank you.
Yeah, although I'm a huge fan of poured in place concrete, I mean, I can't defend it stylistically. I do think that there's an issue. Well, first of all, this would have to be concrete, reinforced concrete, because if you look at that section and the axon at the end, there is no way you could do that out of anything but concrete, or I guess you could do it out of steel with, some sort of wrapped steel. So I don't necessarily think the problem is with the material, which I think is essential for you to achieve your goals spatially and formally. But I do think that the renderings could use another several passes to get at the kind of atmosphere that I think your plan, your scheme embodies, and that I think you described really well. But right now, the architecture is coming off as sort of very severe, and then it's stylized with all of these dancers, and they're great, but they're not doing the full job of depicting the actual atmosphere that the architecture would show. I mean, you showed earlier on in the precedent, there's that tower with beautiful wooden shutters, and also one that was draped in greenery. I mean, that's one thing that masonry walls it becomes a maintenance problem sometimes eventually, but green walls are all the rage. They can be done, yeah. And it seems like that idea that the warmth and I don't know, kind of just more approachability of those wooden shutters that you were attracted to in those precedents, and then the green walls, that would do a ton for this. And it's not, I mean, I think you intend that. That's really not coming through in your renderings yet. We just see the kind of bare bones, you know, kind of structural walls. So I would definitely recommend, you know, following on Lorena's feedback to kind of take another pass and kind of put in that layer of, it's not really entourage, it's between architecture and entourage, but your sense of how those surfaces become, some are brown with wood slats and some are green because they're green walls, you know, that are trained, plants that are trained down a wall. I mean, the trees kind of disappear in your renderings, even though they're showing up in the site plan. So they're just not doing you a favor in terms of all of those aspects that I know are in your mind's eye, but they're not coming through in your illustrations yet. But I mean, that's easily rectified, actually. So I don't think it's the material choice so much as it is the kind of style of the renderings. That's my take. Giving you the benefit of the doubt.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
It's a really nice project. Really.
Thank you.
We have one more. Is that Sun Solus? We have one more project before we all go back to the. I could use a very short.
Sun Solus, you are mute.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think that is Sydney.
Could we have a very short break? I'm sorry. I know we're breaking.
Yeah, we can have like 5 minutes because
yeah.
and also we can we can wait for Guillermo, right?
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Yeah.
No, it's not Guillermo. You are with Andrea, right? Sydney?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, I'm back. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Cindy, you can understand. I need to leave, so I'm supposed that Andre's coming here in a bit.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you very much for your feedbacks.
Can you guys see this okay in full screen? Okay. So my name is Sydney Steele, and today I'm in Professor Bordone's section. Sorry, one second. I'm gonna reshare. And today I'll be presenting a design entitled Inward Social Housing. This co-housing community is a physical reflection of the surrounding city's best characteristics. These are mostly reflected in the distribution of public and shared spaces on the ground floor that allow close relationships to be fostered among residents, while also aiming to maintain strong relationships with residents of the neighborhood as a whole. Some steps and concepts that helped arrive to the final design. Firstly, the sectional home, with the main concept of alternating floor levels that include double height spaces. Secondly, the vertical home, with the main concept of alternating ceiling heights, creating compressed private spaces and open public spaces with a lattice on the facade that corresponds to the level of privacy of the program inside. And finally, the main inspiration for the 3-unit designs and the general block scheme of the collective housing project is the horizontal home. Breaking down this plan allowed a range of 1 to 10 person units, and the idea of a central courtyard that connects all access points is present in the final design. Notable features in the Uptown neighborhood are French Truck Coffee, a cleaners, an elementary school, and steak and Thai restaurants. Open markets such as the French Market, outdoor cafes such as Café du Monde, outdoor gathering spaces such as City Park, and art and music studios such as those in the French Quarter are city staples that help create the creative, festive, and soulful city residents love. So in modified ways, these elements have been incorporated into the ground floor. Other prominent features of New Orleans homes are wooden facades and balconies. An alternating wooden grain corresponding to the program inside and a single balcony for each unit create the exterior of the design with concise windows to combat the southern heat. A design I looked to when creating the block scheme is this plan by Peter Chamberlain. I appreciated the way the perimeter organization of built structures and vegetation allowed for maximum use of the central courtyard with multiple access points. Another design I looked to when creating the facade is this residential community by Minot's Miranda Architects. This precedent helped organize the alternating wooden grain of the facade with balconies and windows. This is the site with the proposed design highlighted in the center. The stiff perimeter approaches the inside to engage both the street and courtyard activity, and is why the project is entitled Inward Social Housing. Highlighted here are the comparison between current structures with proposed structures. Highlighted in this diagram are the 4 main access points from each street and how they connect with the center courtyard, and the secondary paths that lead to the housing and vertical cores highlighted in gray. Here are proposed gardens in gray and trees that shade the primary and secondary paths in light green. These diagrams show the breakdown of public spaces for everyone in the neighborhood and the breakdown of shared spaces, some spaces being for everyone in the community and some for only those that live in that particular building. In the ground floor plan, you can see the incorporation of public open air markets facing the streets, a public pool, corner store, and cafes for everyone in the city to use. Also the gym, basketball court, and meeting rooms for everyone in the community, and the art and music studios for just those that live in that building. The public markets contain porches to bring more New Orleans influence and ventilation to the design, and the vertical cores have private entrances for residents only. Here is the intentional community for each type of unit, ranging from a single young adult to a family of 5 to a group of 10. And in total, there's 70 units. This is the second floor plan with 31 and 2-bedroom units. This is the typology for the second floor. On the top, you can see the diagram that shows 1 vertical core per 3 units. This is the third floor plan with 20 2-bedroom units. Here are the units for the third floor, with 2 units being for 1 vertical core. And finally, the fourth floor plan with 23 bedroom units that have a mobile wall in the middle and can be transformed into 1 6-bedroom unit. Highlighted here are the fourth floor units with 1 vertical core being for 2 units. This north-south section shows how the vertical cores and courtyard connect. And this east-west section shows a little bit more of the public spaces, for example, the pool and corner store. This is a view from Barone Street entrance into the center courtyard. This is a view of the open markets from the corner of Barone and Jenna Streets. And finally, a view from the fourth floor, from a fourth floor room, looking out into the courtyard below. Quickly, I'll switch over and show an animation. This animation section shows activities in the public and shared spaces at 3 times of day, morning, midday, and night. And that's all. Thank you.
Well, I'm ready to say kudos to the teaching team because it's another great project, Sydney. Really nice. It's good to see you, by the way.
Yeah.
She's one of my alums from first year. So again, very much like the last project, I think you really nailed the scale. And I think Javier really kind of demonstrated what I meant by that you understand. I'm going to try to annotate. You understand the scale of the typical residential kind of unit in New Orleans, and you grab onto that. And even though it's very different, it you know, it kind of houses more families. It's multi-story, not saying, you know, but you get that idea that in terms of the syncopation and the rhythm of the street, you don't overwhelm the rather, you know, it's a rather dainty urban scale, quite frankly, you know, when you walk along the street. So I think you really, you got that. And in each of the pieces, there is a sense that you fully have integrated and understand that concept, which I think is very important. I also think that breaking it into these, you know, sort of 4 bars, or I guess you could say, yeah, 5 bars, or you could say 3 plus an L-shaped one, right? I think you've done a really great job of almost, you know, really kind of weaving those 3 existing buildings in, and thereby kind of masking their, you know, the fact that they're actually interrupting a larger block plan idea. I think in your case, there's no sense of that interruption. You've really kind of knitted them into your overall composition really well. That's something that I've seen, you know, happening in various degrees in prior projects, but it can really kill a project if you kind of pretend they're not part of your project. And so I can see that you've really, you know, that you were cognizant of that all the way through. I also think that, you know, the way you're conceiving the project, the programming of it, you know, for the pool, is the pool indoor or outdoor?
The pool is indoor. I had it outdoor at bid review, and I just kind of blocked the gardens, and for flooding purposes, I moved it inside.
I see. Well, I'm kind of torn about that. I mean, well, ever since I've moved to New Orleans, I'm like, we've got to get a pool at our house. It's a huge amenity here. I mean, I would almost say a necessity, except I have successfully lived here without an outdoor pool. But such an important kind of part of it, seemingly this kind of climactic context. And then you have the issue of water and needing, temperate, kind of periodic retention of excess water and that kind of thing. And I know that it may seem a little icky, but they've made great gains in these sort of pond pools, these outdoor kind of, they're cleansed, but they're not, completely hermetically sealed environments with, one kind of water versus, another kind. So I don't know. I think I might have pushed that a little bit more, the idea of an outdoor pool that you could even maybe have made it partially indoor, partially outdoor, like at Zoom Thor's Baths, there's a main pool that is sort of part in the building and part out of the building. I'm not sure. I think that there's an opportunity there to weave together a really great programmatic idea. I almost want to go back and say, anybody who didn't have a pool, you missed the boat. But I think thinking of it as a landscape element, I don't know, that there's promise there. And so I'm glad to hear that that was actually your first instinct. And I can imagine that there were maybe pragmatic issues that were brought up, logistical issues that were brought up that kind of, scared you off. I understand that, but I think that might have been worth fighting for, actually. Maybe you have a retractable roof, so sometimes it's indoor, sometimes it's outdoor, something like that. At any rate, so I love the kind of sheer facades with the loggia at the ground level. I think that feels very urban, but again, because you've kept the scale of the individual buildings within reason, it doesn't feel monumental and overwhelming. I mean, there's so many things that I could say really positive about your project. And I'm saying all that because I'm getting ready to my one quibble. I always have at least one, right? You know me. And that's if you go to the site, well, I can use it here. I was going to say the site plan, but this is fine. This works. I have an allergy to redundant corners in urban plans. Why? Because they're not programmed. They're not really ever used for it. So they don't belong to anyone. So they just become literally like trash zones or like crime zones. I mean, it's just, they become throwaway spaces. And so I kind of wish that you had made, I think on the right-hand side here, am I correct that this is the market portion, right? You have market stalls on those other.
Yes.
Like here and here. And I think so. I see that that's kind of a public entrance to something else to get inside the block, but I feel like it could have just been a smaller slot between stalls or something, but that you claim the urban corner. This should be a rule of architecture, claim the urban corner. And then on this side, what is here? What's adjacent to it? Is there something in here that could have been continued down?
Another public market.
Another public market. So, I mean, and this may be just my pet, concern or whatever, but I have never seen a successful redented open urban corner like that. It's almost always just becomes unloved, uncared for, trash collection area. So I think that is just, it's such a quibble. It's a tiny little part of your whole project, but I guess I want to be the one who stands up for, kind of an urban sensibility that understands the importance of every corner, of a block. And that corner is kind of claimed somehow with architecture, not just with a green lawn. And it's a really common thing. We see it a lot in student projects, but so I feel like I'm a little bit of a woman on a mission. I feel like I have to bring this stuff up when I see it. And I think you have really a stunning project. I mean, it's so controlled. You have control over this project. It's really, really well coordinated. I don't see any kind of crazy huge balconies with yucky understory spaces. I mean, there's so much that you've done really well here. I mean, I would love to live here. I can see this as a really wonderful place. So, and I'm
That
picky.
is high price.
It is high price. I'm very picky. So my hat's off to you, Sydney. I think you did a wonderful job.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Sydney. Could you go to the ground floor plan, please? Yeah. I look into your the name you gave to your project, which is Inward Social Housing, right? So when we look at to your project, it works really well when something like this is happening, right? Because this is inward and this is inward, but when this happens in here, it doesn't work so good. So maybe it was time to find out what does it mean to combine two typologies into your building. What happens if this is just a linear block? No more than that. It could work again. It works. It doesn't have to be always the same movement in all parts of your project, right? And I do like this idea of if this is the section, right? It's something like this, and then you have these kind of boxes, right? So this is outside and this is inward. Could this be like this at some points in your homes? I mean, each home could have any singular, particular, whatever space to be used like an eye opened to this inward place. I don't know why, because I feel that there's something in the language you use to solve or to build your facades that can be used again inside your block. And it can be also related to the way you work on the ground floor. So I don't know, just to have that in mind. It's not a yes or no. It's something that when I look at your presentation comes to my mind to see, could it be or not? I don't know. Just but for me, it's not just this kind of eyes in the upper levels, but just have a thought about what happens when this is too close to these buildings. This is a very tricky point in your ground floor plan, but just that. Congrats for the project.
I was going to follow up on that because in this plan, what I read is that like somehow for this moment, when you say the outside and the inward, this part is working very differently than the other ones, and somehow this one to me is asking just to be this way, right, in this moment, and the typology needs to change. So it works towards this view, which is your inward, but somehow this one is not following the same laws that the others are. So I think that this needs to change and just become a different, so it's like, okay, you need to keep working with that inward, but it is a different level, it's a different gradient of inward because it is facing this building, right? So there is an inward here, but not really your inward courtyard. So there is a challenge that you could continue working with. I really like in this project all the way in which all the different programs are able to fit in that inner core is very beautiful, because somehow in this section it works very well, that it is a second level, not where it becomes probably a terrace to look inwards but not inside. So that different gradient of looking but not inhabiting. I think that there is a lot you can continue working in that interior courtyard. I definitely agree with the idea of a pool inside. We have not seen a pool in all these projects, and you should definitely fight for that. And as Wendy was saying, like maybe it is more like a natural pool that needs to be treated, and it is more like a wetland. And, you know, people need to adjust not to have like a beautiful Miami Beach pool. It is a special pool for New Orleans that is cool and natural. And it can be used at different moments. Maybe it cannot be used all the time because of the events, but then it works and performs for those different critical events. But then when time passes and, you know, all the wetland performs, then you can, you know, just refresh yourself. I totally will go for that. Maybe the part I like the most is the lodges in this project, because somehow I feel that they really fit into New Orleans. I've never been, but because of the pictures that you gave to us, I can see that, wow, that is really, really good. Like, it just follows the typology, but it is being like rethought and upgraded and modernized in a very elegant manner. And then the materials are like really well, I love the materialities in the object. The one I like the most, because I think that but just by the elegance of working with material in different directions, you are able to give a difference in, we don't read your project as a horizontal slab. We are able, even if it is horizontal and it is continuous, we can read different parts of that building. I can also imagine that with different levels of light, that would also be very beautiful in the performance of that facade, because when, like, a certain parts of the day, because one direction is this and the other is this and the other is that, then you will have like different shading in that facade that will respond to the trees that you are planting outside. So I think that you could also play with that. The trees are not only pumping, but they are like kind of shadow machines. No, they are casting shadows into the ground, casting shadows into the facade, and creating this amazing atmosphere. Where does this picture come from? The picture of the trees?
This one?
Yes.
That's in City Park. It's a.
So that is New Orleans.
Yes, it's in the city.
That's fantastic. Like, I want to see more of those in your projects. I mean, look at that. Like, that is an amazing canopy. It's just like an amazing place to be. So I see that you have those in your interior courtyard, but you need to draw them like those. You need to start loving and being empathic, right, with those branches that really, really occupy the space. That would be really marvelous if you could continue working with those in your interior courtyard, so that we feel like inside that. That is amazing. And then below that, we will be visiting Wendy living in your project, refreshing in a wetland of some sort.
I see a live oak in there. It's sort of light, but I see that canopy, don't I? Isn't that?
Yes, it is there. I think that, to me, exactly, that one is the one. I want that one to occupy the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's true. You probably only need one or two to kind of actually fill the whole courtyard. And so some of the smaller trees, maybe you don't need, or maybe they're along an edge, they're potted trees, they're much more, kind of tall and thin or something. Yeah, those are amazing. That is an image of City Park, but the ones that I was speaking about with the former project and Audubon Park, that's sort of the same thing I was thinking of.
Those are the ones I remember from Savannah, very similar in the streets. It's like, it's really, really unbelievable. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, they really are.
Congratulations, Sydney. I think that you have a great project.
You really do.
Thank you guys for your comments. These are very helpful.
great precedents too, both local, historic ones, as well as the ones that you looked at, the newer project. I mean, they're so appropriate. They really, and I think that they all contributed to your understanding of, how to make housing in this city. So.
I have a comment, and this is like for all the students that are in this section, that I see that all the buildings are always like drawn with a flat roof. And I think that there is something to also continue experimenting with the roof. It seems to rain a lot, so somehow like that roof can do more in your projects in order to direct maybe the water into the inner courtyard. So you need to design like how that water can be like contained and then drawn down exactly into the interior. Exactly, and it even become part of the design if you think that if it goes outside and it makes noise in that inner courtyard, it becomes part of that design as well. I don't see. I mean, there is the other ones, the ones that are there. They seem to have like pitch roofs. So that is something to consider also, like how do you finish your building, how it can perform as a green roof or contain water or just directed to the inner. That is a point in all the projects today that I don't think has been developed yet, but all it's just to add like a guinda. I don't know how to say that. Just to be perfect, no?
Yeah, because most of you try to add a different typology solution for the homes in the upper level, being 2 stories or whatever. Maybe the roof can be also part of that difference in the typology. I don't know. Maybe you add something like this, and then you get light here and the whatever. But trying to work with that, it's a great idea. And just one more thing that I mean, it's second year and we all did the same at some point, and maybe we still do it at some point in our careers. Why this height is so big in the ground floor? You don't need to. I mean, if you are in a cafe, you don't need that much height always, because for me, look at this car. It seems to be like too much at some point in these sections. It's a good thing that you understand that the ground floor is different from the home floor ceiling height, but I will try to explore more about what does it mean, trying to vary that height at some points or whatever, because imagine that this is at different levels or whatever, and then you discover that this terrace is not at the same level of the housing unit or whatever, and then you add some kind of space here for HVAC systems or whatever. But trying to play with it with this height may be helpful for you to find out or discover new solutions in your project. But again, this is third year that you're about to start, so keep that in mind and keep working. So congrats, Cindy, congrats.
Thank you so much for all the comments. Javier, Lorena, Whitney, it's been great. I think we have to move to room 0, so I will be leaving here. Thank you, Cindy, for your presentation. Okay.
Do we have the link to room 0 or?
I'm going to copy it in the chat.
Oh, please, because it didn't work for me for some reason.
Okay, I will copy it again.
Thank you, Andrea.
That's fine. Room 0.
Okay.
There it is. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
See you there.